I haven't got a witty intro for you. We were just so fucking lucky. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Don't normally swear in the intro, but I had to make the point on this occasion. Welcome to episode 469 of Motorsport 101. As you've probably guessed if you're a regular listener to this show, given the F1 episode that came before it, this is going to be on MotoGP's Catalan Grand Prix, of course, in Barcelona. One of the big headline blue ribbon events of the year. I wish I could be coming to you from a nicer sounding place regarding this, and I feel like I've got to make this point before we really get into it. There was some genuine brilliance that came out of this race weekend. Like Aprilia, if you didn't enjoy Aprilia's post-race celebration, you are not human. It was beautiful. I mentioned this when I wrote my Dre's race review piece about this race weekend. Like, the scenes were wonderful. Like Maverick Vinales, the man who has been through more political drama in MotoGP than anyone in the last decade.
And some of it of his own making.
He'll be the first guy to admit it to you. Was in tears, hugging his teammate, hugging Aleix Espargaro's children, like the family that they are. Like, he said it was one of the best days of his life, and he finished in second. A man that's won 9 MotoGP races in his career. You know, Aleix Espargaro, who is one of the most Marmite sort of characters in Grand Prix bike racing, but I love him. I've always loved him. I think he's a fantastic personality, and I think the sport needs fiery, passionate, heart-on-sleeve people like him to make the point that he needs to make a lot of the time. Like,
always good for a quote.
And he's a fantastic fucking quote. And I think, like, I know enough people to know he is one of the good people in bike racing, one of the genuinely good people who, like, what I've been told by many people is if you're a friend of Aleix, you're a friend for life. He's that sort of person. Aprilia was awesome, and a salute to them for how far they've come, because this is their greatest ever day in bike racing. A 1-2 finish.
Top 5.
Miggy was there too in the top 5 again. You know, second time that we've had 3 Aprilias in the top 5 in the last 3 races. They've been brilliant, and there was so many.
They used to be the manufacturer where your career went to die. Now somehow that's Honda.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see because, like, Aleix Espargaro has put the work in.
Oh, 100%.
He burned the candle at both ends for a long, long time to get to where he is, and is now a multi-time race winner out of it.
3 wins to his name after going 199 starts before he had his first. It's crazy how these things turn out. We'll talk a little bit more about Aprilia later on in the show, and of course, you can probably haven't tell already. Of course, I'm joined as ever by Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Always a pleasure to be sharing the ring with them. But it's kind of hard, and we'll do the social media stuff at the end of the show. I want to get straight into this one.
Yeah, because what's good is not what happened at the start of this Catalan Grand Prix.
No. And we've got to do a little bit of general housekeeping. We didn't do an episode on Austria a couple of weeks ago. We didn't feel like there was enough.
We tried. We went into the set list. We tried. It was, I think Dre and I have both said it in private. Getting blood from a stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? Like, Francesco Bagnaia was perfect.
We can only say that Pecco is great. Ducati is great. Japan is awful so many times before it starts to get a little boring.
And we don't want to bore you. We want to entertain you while talking about motorsport. And at the same time, like, Austria gave us very little to work with besides Johan Zarco's move to Honda being made official, which we'll get into maybe towards the end of the show if we've got some time. And Jorge Martin playing a game of bowling during the sprint.
He thought he was at the Go Bowling at the Glen.
And amazingly, not the worst first corner incident we've had so far this season. And we'll get into the reasons why very, very shortly. So that was the reason why we didn't do an episode on Austria. So forgive us if you're the sort of person that likes the housekeeping of having every race reviewed. Maybe on the Dre's race review column, but not to get everybody out for a 45-minute podcast where we're waffling. I don't believe in that. At the end of the day,
like I always make it a point to try and read Dre's reviews because they're a nice pastime at work, you know. But there's nothing I could have said that wasn't already said in there, and sometimes we agree a little too much on the show. Sometimes we disagree quite violently. That would have basically been all of us saying all the exact same things for 45 minutes.
Yeah. So
who likes that?
So look, it's not that we don't want to do these shows, it's that we believe in a genuine level of quality, and we couldn't justify this one. So forgive us on that. Hopefully, I don't like. This is a morbid one, and it's not a very nice one. But I hope you get more out of this than what we were planning to get out of Austria. Is what I would say.
Thankfully, after initial reports, this one is thankfully going to be less morbid than we thought it was going to be.
Let's set the scene here. It's the first lap of the Catalan Grand Prix, a race that, unlike the last one, this was anything but routine. We get to turn one and 6 Ducatis hit the gravel. Enea Bastianini overcooks his entry, tucks the front, and collects Johann Zarco, Marco Bezzecchi, Luca Marini, Alex Marquez, and Fabio Di Giannantonio all at once, which gave us a very profound motorsport picture of 2023 of all of them writhing in the gravel in agony. And that was already bad. One corner later, championship leader Francesco Bagnaia, again coming off of a perfect weekend in Austria, odds-on favorite to win the championship, suffers a massive high side, and then had his legs run over by the bracket bad. But again, Francesco Bagnaia had his legs run over, and amazingly, to paraphrase the words of the legendary Lou Gehrig, Francesco Bagnaia can consider himself the luckiest man on the face of the earth because he only suffered contusions to his legs. It's most likely he'll miss Misano next weekend, while Enea Bastianini will miss the next 3 races with a broken ankle and hand, with reports that Marco Bezzecchi also has a broken hand out of the exchange.
Sorry to interject here briefly, but in the time since I've written my notes on this, apparently Bagnaia will try to race this weekend.
Wow.
Yes, that was confirmed by Ducati. I'm subscribed to them, to their media newsletter. So I got on the email and just like, wait, fucking what?
Wow.
Yeah. He's going to try and race this weekend. He has to pass the medical clearance on Thursday, but if he does, he can try to compete.
Wow.
We'll have to wait and see.
It gives me big Marc Marquez trying to ride out the injury vibes, but hopefully it works out the best. But I don't know. Both of you watched this race. Both of you saw the incident, so y'all can let's just talk about the incident.
Yeah, I mean, and talking about that image, there's one image, same photographer, got one image of the initial crash. And then there's another image of that crash. I think it's Alex climbing up out of the gravel, gesturing. Yeah. And in the background, you can see Bagnaia already upside down, about 10 feet in the air. Because it was, I mean, he cracked the throttle and the rear of the bike just barked no. And that was one of the worst. That was like a 2-stroke style high side.
Hellacious.
Some of the shit we used to see with like Danny Pedrosa.
Oh, God, yeah.
And
you know what it reminded me of? To cut you real quick. You know what it reminded me of? You know when Marquez hit Pedrosa's traction control cord by accident at Aragon in 2013?
Yeah, and Pedrosa's bike just exploded the rear tire out from under him.
It was a carbon copy of that. It's like look, Ducati have since come out and said they do not know what caused that high side because they've looked at the data initially and it doesn't show anything out of the ordinary, apparently.
Because that's the last bike that you'd expect to do it, because the Ducati, if it's ever going to crash, typically has a front tire slip, a low side.
Right.
Which is concerning, and we'll talk about some of the greater reasons why, because we've talked about them a lot on this podcast, but I think some of the more established MotoGP media is now really quite fed up and has talked at length about what's going on with the tires. We'll get into that in a little bit. But in the weirdest possible way, there's sort of a right way to get run over by a bike, whether it's a bicycle or a motorcycle.
Apparently.
And in a game of millimeters, and by pure chance, pretty much all the deflection in that incident went onto Binder's front tire. And Bagnaia came out of it. I mean, we were talking about it before the doctors came out and talked about the actual extent of the injury. But this was going to be season ending at minimum. This was going to be potentially career affecting or ending. It had all the hallmarks of it. And thanks to Dorna's brilliant TV direction, which we'll talk about later as well, we got to watch Bagnaia writhing on the ground in pain for a few minutes in slow motion, as if to capture all of it for everyone watching. But somehow, Pecco Bagnaia is, relatively speaking, okay. I don't know how.
He left the hospital 12 hours later under his own power. I don't know how. Binder retired from the race with an issue and with a technical issue, and he went to see Bagnaia. He's like, I wasn't expecting to see him chilling. Right, my God! Like a part of my soul came back into my body when he said that, because I needed something to lighten the mood after that. Because Binder apparently was distraught, thinking that he'd done something potentially fatal, and the man's chilling there as if nothing's happened, which is ridiculous. Everything about this was ridiculous, and like I said, I watched that in real time, and I thought he was a dead man walking. And I've seen, unfortunately, as a bike fan, I've seen incidents that have turned out to be fatal. Jason Dupasquier still rings in my mind as someone that watched that qualifying session live as it happened. And, like, I'm going to get into the broadcast side of this, so you might want to skip this for those who might find this upsetting, which is completely understandable. Please look after yourselves as listeners. I do try my very best to warn people as best I can before this sort of discussion happens. That was still 2 years ago. It doesn't feel
still
like
very.
It's still very
raw.
Yeah, it's that I watched in horror as that man was having CPR delivered to him, failed CPR being delivered to him as it was happening for half an hour. It felt like days, praying for news, praying for positive news. It never happened. He was dead less than 24 hours later. He was brain dead. He was taken off life support by his family because he was run over by two different people. I feared that we had just lost the world champion. Genuinely. Like, the worst possible thoughts entered my mind. Because I saw Binder's wheel hit his legs in real time. I was terrified of what I had just seen. Now, you can't blame the sport for that. This is the unfortunate nature of bike racing. There are, I wouldn't say maybe 1 in 1,000 sort of days where this unfortunate kind of accident can happen. It's a walking miracle to me that Francesco Bagnaia was able to walk away from this at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day. I cannot stress this enough. Dorna has to improve the way they broadcast these sorts of incidents. A little bit of sensitivity and a little bit of empathy goes a long fucking way. I have good friends. I have good colleagues. Shout out to one of them, Laura Leslie at Autosport. She's a very good friend of mine. Does fantastic work over at Autosport. She tweeted about this, and there was a bunch of dude bros that got in her mentions talking about, oh, this is just a part of motorsport, it's fine. Fuck off. How dare someone express some empathy and sensitivity towards a horrifying situation? I get it. Maybe you've been brought up on MotoGP for the last 20 years, and do not get me wrong, the sport is absolutely guilty to a certain degree of gladiatorializing this sport. 100%. It's a part of its reputation is self-inflicted. They've celebrated and championed perseverance, riding through injury, calling the riders aliens, and
look at when Marquez broke his arm in 2020. Look at all the media coverage around that and the glorification of it, and it destroyed 3.5 years of the man's career because no one was willing to sit him down and say, "Dude, you're out of your mind."
Yeah,
knock it off.
Marquez looks back on that now and he deeply regrets it.
Yeah, but you don't get to take that back. When you have a catastrophic injury on a motorcycle, look, my dad and my brother were in a motorcycle crash a better part of a decade ago. My brother still has issues from it. I've wiped out on dirt bikes before. I own a motorcycle myself. There's no takebacks.
No.
You fall the wrong side of that line. Doesn't matter what you think afterwards, if you get the chance to think afterwards, because of the danger inherent to it. And
your life's out of your hands at that point.
And more than usual for these guys, because they're riding 300 horsepower carbon fiber aero missiles.
Right. I want to make this point real quick, that, this... I wrote this in my letter, and I'll say it again here. I thought collectively sports broadcasting had learned a lesson from Euro 2020. You don't have to be a soccer fan to know what I'm talking about if you know of Euro 2020, and I'm referring to the Christian Eriksen incident. Christian Eriksen, who suffered a cardiac arrest in the middle of a game. We all saw it. The world was watching. And it was, again, a horrific example in how bad the broadcasters could not have handled it any worse, in my opinion. The players had to get sheets and shield the cameras while Eriksen was having CPR delivered to him. Thank God for the referee Anthony Taylor, who spotted the situation and probably saved Eriksen's life as a direct result of what had happened. Yeah. But the fact that barricades and shields had to be put up, the fact that Kasper Schmeichel, the captain of the team, was having to comfort Christian's partner, who was understandably distraught on the sidelines.
Yeah.
It was every evidence of the clumsiness and the insensitivity and the lack of humanity shown towards a harrowing incident. Thank God Christian Eriksen obviously would go on to make a full recovery.
Not just a full recovery, but go on to still be a very productive player in his sport.
He still plays for Manchester United right now, and he's still an important player on our team.
Yeah.
It was horrifying to watch. I thought collectively we'd learned a lesson from that.
We didn't learn a goddamn thing because, we're cutting to, Taradozzi comforting Bagnaia's partner in the garage while she is visibly distraught because Pecco's on the ground, writhing in pain. Because don't get me wrong, he's relatively uninjured. Taking a bike to the leg sucks. I've been there. But
there is zero justification. Yeah, there is zero justification. Like, I can maybe just about entertain a debate about showing a replay. And I think that's too much. Right. That's
and we
one
didn't know
thing.
The severity of it at that point. But
there is no these broadcasters are Dorna, I have praised them to the heavens for their production truck. It's one of the very best in sports. No question. What I will say on top of that is there is nothing stopping you from putting a content warning on a replay to warn your audience about what could be. If you're going to show the replay, at least warn your audience.
Even if it's your commentators just saying people look away.
Yeah. If you know a replay is coming, you can communicate that from the truck to the people that are broadcasting. And this is no jab at our buddy Lewis, who does a tremendous job over there. We all know that, right? I can just about entertain that debate. There is zero justification for showing a slow-motion replay of Francesco Bagnaia walking around on a live track in agony, not knowing what his condition was. None. It's completely fucking insensitive. It makes me angry, whoever made that decision. There is no good that is not making your broadcast any better. It is not painting any better a picture for anyone that's watching what's happened. If you've seen that live, you know exactly what happened. I do not need to see a man rolling around in agony, not knowing what's happened to him after being run over by a motorcycle. None. It is completely unjustifiable. It angers me that I still have to say this. Did Dorna learn nothing from Jason Dupasquier 2 years ago? Nothing. I can't believe I'm having this conversation again.
Did they learn nothing from earlier this year when Paul Espargaro had his own hellacious accident to start the season? Was just out for half a year. And we got force-fed replays of it for 5 minutes. I mean, there were members of our Discord who walked out on the stream.
There was members of our... we've had our Discord on Motorsport 101 for, I want to say 7 years now. I think 2016.
And of course, we ethically screen share some events for people who want to watch them because, like, hey, there's an interest in that stuff. And now, thanks to the pandemic, we can share, we can watch it together. And, like, yeah, not fun when that happens.
And the point I was going to make here is that I've been doing this. We've been streaming races in there and sharing for 7 years now. It was the first time ever, as someone that hosted a stream, someone asked me to cut the feed. That's the first time that's ever happened to me when streaming a MotoGP race. I've never had that happen until now. Somebody said, "This is too much. Dre, can you cut the feed?" And we are knowledgeable motorsport fans. We watch multiple disciplines. Some of us have been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
I've never had that before. That should go to show you just how insensitive Dorna has been about this. Now, look, I'm lucky. As a privilege of my job, I get to call some of the best reporters in this game friends. Genuinely. I have it off the record that apparently this was one too many for Carmelo Espelta.
Jeez, only took long enough.
I really, really hope that is true. And I really, really hope that this is the one that finally clocks with the production truck that you do not share a replay until at least the bare minimum we know the person is okay. Relatively okay. We got lucky. We were so fucking lucky this past Sunday.
Bagnaia is the luckiest man on planet Earth.
We almost lost the world champion. The best bike rider on the planet right now very nearly died this Sunday. And this is the second time this season I've had to say someone got very, very lucky this weekend. It's not been a good year for bike racing.
No.
It's not been a good few weeks for bike racing. Christmas, Haruki Noguchi was arguably going to be Japan's next great superbike rider. He's killed in a crash at Mandalika in the Asian Road Racing Championship. He's just 22. Otojiro Tanimoto was a journeyman who just made his way up to the top class in All Japan Road Racing. He died in a crash just before the Motegi Super Formula round. He was just 23 years old. We had two people in a Brazilian superbike race, I believe they were brothers, lost their life in the same needless collision. And we watched unfold in real time. It's been rough. We didn't need another tragedy to pile on top of that, let alone one of this magnitude.
And I mean, look, there is an element of that we do sign up for as motorcycle racing fans.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
The risk is unimaginable.
And for many people who are, I've been told by so many people, bike racing's too much, and I will never argue with anybody who says that to me. It's completely valid and an understandable perspective.
Yeah. just because it is the way it is, and there's elements of it that can't change, because once you're off that bike,
they're in God's hands.
It's in God's hands. That doesn't mean we need to have it force-fed down our throats.
And what I will say on top of that, and Matt Oxley, who, again, one of the best in the business, summed it up very well on Twitter during that red flag delay when they were obviously making sure everybody was okay and clearing the track. And I adapted a part of that for the race review that I wrote up because I think it's still absolutely spot on. We are sending 22 motorcycles with over 300 horsepower. Like, I think it's something close, if not over.
It's the baseline. The baseline is 300 now. That used to be the peak.
Yeah, we are now talking, I reckon, something in the ballpark of 2,000 brake horsepower per ton on these machines now. 22 of them with Formula One style aerodynamics,
which have been causing crashes all year.
We saw it last year, this very track last year with Taka Nakagami, who I owe a profound apology to because we didn't realise how big a problem this was going to be until he demonstrated for us the problem with the downforce of these bikes. Ask Marco Bezzecchi at Silverstone.
Which had a contribution to the turn one crash here because Bastianini put his brakes on in the path of someone else and the bike just didn't stop. It just folded the front tire.
You're either looking at brake or you're speeding up because the brakes aren't working. That is a huge problem. It is a huge risk.
We are flat tires.
We are sending 22 bikes with 300 horsepower with 5 wide, with F1 aerodynamics, one of the heaviest braking zones of the year, full speed on this track, with a full run. You're doing 220 miles an hour, going down to 60 for turn 1 in 5.5 seconds of braking. On flat tires, they are doing well.
Yeah, you know how we talked about this a little bit, right, Dre? With the fact that MotoGP, like, everyone shook hands to effectively collaborate on cheating last year.
Yes.
Because
I talked about it. Yeah, I talked about it yesterday on Twitter when people were talking about Formula One, and of course, people keep talking about Abu Dhabi of 2021, and people are like, "Oh my god, cheating! We don't like cheats is bad." And I was like, "I'm a MotoGP fan. The entire sport cheated last year."
And then shook hands with the sport to not get punished because everyone was running illegal tire pressures, whether too high or too low. Well, you know how teams.
Yeah.
You know how teams are getting around the minimum tire pressure rule once they're up to racing speeds? Well, they're just running the tires flat. They're running 1.4 bar, which would be unsafe on a road bike to start these races because they raise so quickly because the aero is putting so much force through them. Their solution to prevent the cheating is to just run the bikes in an unsafe condition.
We are running them on flat tires on the opening lap.
Jason, you're correct in the chat. They would fail MOT. They would fail inspection if you ran. In the US, you would fail inspection if you ran tires that low.
Same in the UK. Like, most cars are a minimum of 2 bars of pressure on a tire. On the road, it's about 2 bar. They're running them at 1.4 on opening laps. They're on flat tires, and then we act surprised when there's a 7-bike pileup on the first corner.
Pecco Bagnaia's bike hurls him heavenward.
Why are we surprised at this?
Yeah, you're playing games with what should be equipment that shouldn't be up for grabs in terms of a performance benefit.
Yeah, I mean, on four wheels,
it's a spec tire that's not fit for purpose.
Yeah, like, and on 4 wheels. How many times have we talked about after Daytona Deflategate, the Rolex 24?
This year's the 10th anniversary of the teams having their hand in the cookie jar at Silverstone, swapping tires, running illegal camber settings. The FIA wouldn't punish them on it. Pirelli was screaming at the teams.
Don't swap them.
Don't swap the tires. Don't run the tire pressures that low. And suddenly Lewis Hamilton's left rear tire delaminates and flies to the sky going down the straight at Silverstone. And all anyone could do was, and all the issues that race, and all anyone could do was blame Pirelli.
Yeah. There was 5 blowouts in that race. I remember that race. There was 5 punches.
When you run tires out of spec, especially a spec tire that is meant to be in a set range of conditions, you invite these problems. And it should not be a shock that these bikes that are generating more power than ever, more downforce than ever, are arguably heavier than ever, have just completely overwhelmed the thing that keeps them on the ground.
And we're doing all of this in a sport that's got 50% more racing than we had last year with the implementation of the sprints that the riders did not agree to. The riders did not get a say in the cookie jar in that.
They were laughed out of the room by those in power when talking about a riders' union.
And get well soon to Enea Bastianini, who has broken a bone in his hand and broken his ankle, will miss the next 3 rounds. It means that Enea Bastianini will miss at least 8 Grand Prix this season.
Yeah, he's had a lost first season.
This is the worst year.
This was supposed to be his breakout year. It was supposed to be his breakout year at a factory team, and it's been completely lost.
Yeah, Dez has a broken hand. We don't know what the status of that is going forward, whether he can still ride on it. We didn't come out of this unscathed at the end of the day. And even though we didn't come out unscathed, we as a racing community are so goddamn lucky.
I think
that Pecco Bagnaia is, for all intents and purposes, okay.
I think this was the first weekend of the year we had a fully healthy grid.
Didn't last long, did it?
It wasn't, because Alex Rins is still out.
Yeah, Alex Rins is out for the foreseeable future. Actually going to have Takumi Takahashi taking over his bike. As
the 5 times Suzuka 8 Hour winner?
You know, as a reward for winning the Suzuka 8 Hours, here's this piece of shit. Go ride it. To say nothing of the fact that...
Yeah, it's like, I don't think we've had a fully healthy MotoGP grid for a Grand Prix this year.
It got a hell of a lot less healthy this weekend.
Because Bastianini got hurt on the sprint. He missed 5 rounds. We had a string of injuries after that. Rins smashed his leg to pieces in Silverstone.
Mark was out for a couple races. Miggy was out.
Yeah. We've lost count of the amount of injuries we've had this season. And Ducati's now got to run, likely, 1 bike next weekend. And they've now got to have Michele Pirro fill in for 3 more races because Bastianini's out until the flyaways.
We lost 7 Ducatis in the space of 2 corners.
How? This is one of those weekends where I honestly just look back and I go, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah, I can't really add any more to that. I wish MotoGP get this shit off the bikes, because we also had a front hole shot device failure in the race for one of the KTMs. Because if we didn't have enough problems with the tires and the rear ride height devices, at some point, we are not going to walk away lucky. And I hope something changes before we lose one of the riders that I love watching.
Could you imagine the mainstream newspaper headlines if Francesco Bagnaia died in that accident? We'd be having a very, very different conversation about the state of this sport. We were this close. Close.
It was
I cannot stress
it
how
was in
lucky
the hands of the racing gods that man is not potentially career-ending injured to not here anymore. It was purely in the hands of the racing gods.
Thank heavens. For once, the racing gods have seen mercy. We don't get that very often.
Thank you, Jason, again in the chat. 2 riders have finished every race: Franco Morbidelli and Augusto Fernandez.
Christ. It's a 22 bike field. And we've had a lot more than that ride at least 1 race this year because of all the injuries.
Yeah.
2 out of 22.
The trend needs to reverse before something happens.
Like I said, this was a weekend. Like, I didn't live tweet. I normally do when a race is on. I just didn't feel like it after that incident.
I didn't have the stomach to.
I was just like,
just get everyone home.
I just looked at that race. I was almost, and it's a shame. I'll talk about it a bit more in a minute because this was a great day for Aprilia, and I applaud them. And they've earned
banner day for them as a team.
They've earned the right to celebrate how they did, and I'm lucky they were afforded the luxury of being able to, given how the start of that race turned out. But this was one of those races where I just go, "What the fuck are we doing here? This is just." It's just, and look, I feel annoyed I'm having to do this on a podcast because we've talked about all of these issues in some capacity relentlessly for the last 2 years.
They just all came to a head all at once.
A supernova. Sephiroth would have been proud of that one. Jesus Christ, what are we doing? It's not going to be one of those occasions where I'm going to scream at the sport to take drastic action, because we've done that for the last year and a half.
Been falling on deaf ears.
They are not going to get this lucky again. I cannot stress this enough. Do something. As a sport, beat your heads together and do something, because we are not going to get this lucky again. We have burnt out our luck on this one. Francesco Bagnaia is lucky to be alive. I can't take another one of these fatalities. I know it's going to happen. It's a part of what we do here. But, God, I'm starting to... at what point does the personal responsibility of this sport stop? I do not know. I don't know where that line is, and I don't want to find out.
Look, and I've said this... I want to say I said this after... might have been Wickens' crash in IndyCar. Racing is unsafe. No matter what kind of racing you do, whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels, no wheels, racing is unsafe. That cannot stop the pursuit of safety ending. You can't get complacent. And we watch every other series. I mean, IndyCar has had the same chassis for 11 years. They've revised it year on year, sometimes multiple times a year, in response to the crashes that we see, the effect that it has on the car, and then working on it again. And motorcycle racing doesn't have that luxury. You can only make bike racing so safe. But if your regulations are just being... if teams are just wiping their ass with your safety regulations when it comes to tire pressures, when it comes to abusing the limited... but you can still work in a set box, aerodynamic rules, you as a sport need to step in. And right. We saw it even when teams weren't technically breaking any rules back in 2010, and the cars were safe, but people were taking their hands off the wheel in Formula One to work their F-ducts. We had drivers going through Eau Rouge and Radeon one-handed. It is your responsibility as a sport to your riders, to your fans, to make sure that, to the best of your ability, your boys get home. And it doesn't feel like Dorna is putting in that effort. And eventually, it's going to bite them in the ass, and someone is going to lose their life over it.
Thankfully, we didn't have to have that conversation tonight.
Came way too goddamn close for my comfort.
We came very, very close, but thankfully we did get a race in the end. It was a pretty mediocre race, if I'm being completely honest.
As we see typically with these bikes now.
I didn't score it in my race review because I didn't feel like it was appropriate to be honest.
But we got a good result out of it. We talked about it. Aleix Espargaro wins. Aprilia 1-2. Miguel Oliviera 5th. Second time in 3 weekends he's in the top 5. So taking away something at least neutral, if not positive, from a race that started negative and lingered and has a whole negative feeling. Gentlemen, how far away are Aprilia from a genuine challenge at the front?
It's hard for me to say because it feels like this year's very different machine. Looks similar on the surface, is actually quite different to last year's.
Very different.
It feels like they got lost for a little bit of how to get the best from this bike. It feels like they have made genuine progress recently. But I wonder how high their ceiling really is when your two riders are Aleix Espargaro and Maverick Vinales, because as solid as they have been, and they are, when Vinales is in the right headspace, he has a very high ceiling and a very high floor. Aleix Espargaro is pretty much arguably like one of the highest floor guys in the field.
Absolutely.
But you have to wonder what is possible when the other guys, again, thankfully they get to keep him. Probably he is going to attempt to race this weekend. The other guys have a bike that is still better in most scenarios, certainly in terms of straight line speed. We saw that in the sprint. And you've got Pecco Bagnaia and Enea Bastianini. Like, outside of DG Antonio, Ducati's worst rider is like a different guy who's still running top 8 on a given weekend.
Yeah.
They're up against it.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it, and I remember my old mucker Lewis telling me this this was like 2 years ago. He said to me, Dre, the biggest floodgate that Aprilia might now have is their riders. And he probably wasn't right. He was probably more right than he realized at the time. And
it's a crazy thing to think. When you consider not too long ago, prospects from Moto2 were turning down rides to Aprilia, which would have been their only ticket to get in the sport, because they realized, this would be embarrassing for me. What's up, Joe Roberts?
This was the manufacturer where careers went to die. Yeah, was it Scott Redding who described it as, you can only polish a turd so much riding this bike in like 2016, 2017. I mean, not too long ago, this was the manufacturer hanging their hat on Andrea Iannone. Remember Dirty Ian?
He's coming back
next
soon.
year in World Superbike.
Oh, yeah.
Don't piss hot again, bud.
On a Ducati as well. He's a very lucky boy. The joke I made, I didn't even really joke about it. I mentioned it in the open letter I wrote, was that Aprilia used to be the nasty team. They, were dragged by many people. And don't get me wrong, I've always said it, like, MotoGP media is a boys' club, very British focused. They did fuck around Sam Lowes. They did fuck around Scott Redding in their times that they were in MotoGP. Objectively, they messed them about, and it was not fair.
They were throwing bodies at the problem, much like Honda has been the last couple of years with their troubles.
And their constant batting for Andrea Iannone, a guy that served the 4-year ban for doping, and he's never taken any accountability for that. They were the nasty team. And then you look at their celebrations in this race. How could you hate that? Like, Aleix Espargaro is one of the all-time good dudes in MotoGP. Maverick Vinales has humbled himself as an Aprilia rider. Is basically part of the family at this point. Like, they celebrated that win like a family. Jorge Martin is a very close friend. He was third on the day. He's a very close friend of Aleix's. They were arm in arm on the side of Parc Ferme, dousing themselves in water with Aleix's kids as a part of the party. It was touching scenes. I've never seen anything like it. Like, they swapped bikes on the way back to Parc Ferme. I've never seen that in 25 years of watching MotoGP. Crazy stuff. It was beautiful scenes.
And they got that's, in many ways, you're a rival as a manufacturer. Your factory team bringing home a 1-2 up against a very dominant Ducati.
Yeah, this was their day. This was objectively their day. It is their greatest day as a manufacturer. I don't know how close that is. It's hard to say, because you're right. I think they were a little bit lost the first half of this season. I think they found something. I think also low grip tracks absolutely play into their favor. And Catalunya was a bit patchy this weekend. It was spots of rain over the course of the weekend. Not a huge amount, not enough to massively disrupt the run-in, but it probably made the track a little bit slippier.
It's a forgiving bike when the track gets greasy.
Yes, and it makes your riders more confident. It makes them push more. And it adds to their speed. And that's what happened with Aprilia in this race. Now, don't get me wrong. Bagnaia not being there is still a bit of a question mark, because we don't know where he would have factored in if he was fully healthy and was able to take part in this. There was a big fucking hole at the front of that race where Bagnaia was going to be.
7 Ducatis. missing.
And only 5 of them were able to take the restart. Both factory riders were the 2 guys that couldn't take the grid again. Bears allegedly broke his hand but continued, which is fucking wild to me if that's true, that he really has broken his hand. But it's certainly a huge step in the right direction. One of the big question marks for me going into this season was going to be, what does Aprilia do in life after concessions? And the proof is they've as a manufacturer they've won more races this season than they ever have. They've got 2 wins to their name this year. That's already another step in the right direction. Because hey, Aleix's win in Argentina last year was a little bit of an outlier. This time they can say they've won 2 races this year on merit. One of them genuinely beating Bagnaia in a final lap showdown. Can't ask for much more than that.
And was able to run down past him in the sprint here.
Yeah.
Aleix
won by seconds.
Yeah, because they could keep their rear tires, whereas the Ducatis were cooking them a bit. But it's just a shame as far as the competitive prospects for the season that Aprilia has probably gotten on top of their bike and their problems too late to really do anything with it. But now it's going to be a question, okay, you've won 2 races and you've been looking better and better across the season. You need that trend to continue. And you need to carry that into 2024 because 2 really high-profile names end up as free agents at the end of next year. Make yourself a destination.
Yeah.
If Marc Marquez if in a hypothetical scenario, if Marc Marquez walks out of Honda and leads Aprilia to the promised land after missing years of his prime due to injuries, wouldn't that be something?
Jeez, that would shut a hell of a lot of a certain fan base up. Their multi-manufacturer thing.
Third shout out to Jason again. Third in the Manufacturers Championship right now. They're 12 points behind KTM at the moment.
And that's the thing. I think KTM has a worse bike across the board. It's just that Brad Binder has been burning the candle at both ends to get the bike where it is.
I bet saying just a couple of years ago that like KTM and Aprilia would be top 3 manufacturers in the sport.
Europe has taken over bike racing.
Yeah, you just delete Japan from the constructors' championship.
Could you imagine even 3 months ago we'd be saying, let's change the entire sports rule book to try and get concessions for Japan to get them back into play.
That's what happened at the start of the 2010s with Ducati. Because Ducati fell from contenders to nowhere.
Let's not forget of the 6 Japanese bikes that were out there during this race. 5 of them were in the bottom 5 finishes. Only Fabio Quartararo, who is a demon round Catalunya, was in any relevant position. I think he was 7th in the end.
Last year he won this race.
He won this race on a bad Yamaha last year. He dominated this race.
He was champion 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, and look, this weekend Yamaha, Fabio forced them to throw away their aero package for this year, go back to the previous aero, and it helped him out. Marc Marquez was making shapes, trying to bulldoze the Honda into doing something, and it doesn't have anything to give.
This was the first Grand Prix all year where both Repsol Hondas saw the flag.
And Mir barely did. His final lap times, I saw this earlier on the race and I could scarcely believe it. Because both of them stuck the soft on, because this is just experimentation hour for Honda. They've got pretty much all 4 bikes on weird alternate setups. Their softs burnt off so bad, Mark came crashing back through the field, not literally for once, and was basically the best of the bad bunch besides Fabio. Mir's final laps were in the 144s. Those were slower than his Moto2 times in 2018.
Christ almighty.
He was 5 seconds behind Leckrona, who has been doing a good job, situation considered, but
just get it home.
He's on the old bike as well, the old Honda aero package, because now we're talking about full-blown aero packages in MotoGP. And there's just not a lot positive to speak about there. Fabio Quartararo is still him. Marc Marquez, bless his heart, is still trying, but there's nothing else positive in that entire country of motorcycle racing. Jonathan Rea just bailed on Kawasaki. What the fuck?
Well, he did go to another Japanese manufacturer. It's not all bad.
The one that spent this entire year getting its ass beat until they nerfed the Ducati.
The thing I was going to make, it's worth a mention. Yes, Jonathan Rea, the hell has frozen over. Jonathan Rea has left Kawasaki after 9 years there to go to Yamaha for next year. Is a 36-year-old Jonathan Rea better than a 26-year-old Toprak at this point?
Well, a 26-year-old Toprak and his manager have rendered that question irrelevant.
Depends who you ask and if that person is Kevin Walsh on Twitter.
Because he's now got, Toprak's gone to BMW. Looking like it's going to... He's apparently he's going to be for Scott Redding, allegedly. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, good luck to all of them. That's going to be... we also found out that Nicolo Buligas won the Ducati second bike sweepstakes, who's dominating World Supersport 600 at the moment, so good luck to them. But if that's your idea of the last roll of the dice, Johnny, then good luck to you, is what I would say. Because, Bautista's still beating their ass in the QRTs, as an old man used to say. Good luck to them.
Mir talking about what's going on the bike. At the moment, I don't have any connection with the throttle to control, so I just spin. And whatever the tire I have, I destroy it. His final 4 laps were high 144s. His fastest lap in his sole Moto2 year in 2018 was a 144.394. This guy was world champion in 2020. This guy was one of the highest floor guys in MotoGP until about the middle of last year when all of Suzuki destabilized in the wake of their imminent withdrawal.
Departure, yeah.
God, how has it gotten this bad?
More questions we will have to try and wait to get to Misano to answer because they're racing there this weekend. They've got a test to get through first.
That test might be the most important non-championship round of MotoGP running for the next 5 years for what the implications are going to be. The future of Japanese
motorcycle racing might hinge on that test. I cannot exaggerate that enough.
And they've everyone in the teams has talked about it, but it's not necessarily about coming out of the gates and having a Ducati beater. The mentality has to change because that's the only thing that's going to get you over the line.
If you're Marc Marquez or you're Fabio Quartararo, you've got to show them something. Show them something to show you're moving in the right direction. Otherwise, they will bail at the end of their contracts at the end of next year.
Yep.
No doubt about it. I spoke to Fabio Quartararo.
Whoever picks up Marc Marquez and Fabio Quartararo, may God help Honda and Yamaha.
Aprilia is making a very, very good argument for Fabio Quartararo, is what I will say. Misano, this upcoming weekend, we'll have to wait and see who takes part and who doesn't. We do not know yet. As Francesco Bagnaia will have a medical by the time this goes out. He's got to pass that medical on Thursday afternoon to see if he's healthy enough, declared fit to try and compete. We'll have to wait and see. Best wishes to Enea Bastianini and potentially Marco Bezzecchi as well. We wish him a speedy one. Dear God, did we get lucky on this one. Places you can find us real quick. Motorsport101.com is our website. Patreon.com/Motorsport101 if you'd like to back us financially on there. At Dre_WTF1, at CBuckley917, at RJ O'Connell. And of course, the podcast itself at Motorsport_101. Please, dear God, give me a MotoGP episode or I don't have to be a negative Nancy for 45 of its 55 minutes. I'm Dre Harrison.
I will take the most boring race in the history of motorcycle racing next time out. I will take that to the bank.
You won't have far to look, given the way the sport is at the moment. I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. Take care.